Hi guys, welcome back to yet another fun DIY video here about good old Athena. Every time I publish a new video, I get a nice little boost of new subscribers, and in case you're one of them, this lovely looking boat here behind me is Athena. She's a 38-foot sailboat and she was built in 1987. I am slap dab in the middle of a somewhat extensive refit. The end goal is for my girlfriend Ava and I to be able to move aboard Athena in roughly 2 years. But before that can happen, there's a bit of work to take care of. The last month has been spent finishing an osmosis treatment. That involved laying up an extra layer of 300 gram biaxial fiberglass on the side of the hull, fairing the hull using TLG 625, applying a barrier coat consisting of West Systems 105 epoxy and 422 barrier coat additive, and then finally, last weekend, we were able to complete the process by applying copper coat. Well, complete the process might be a slight exaggeration because I'm actually not all the way done yet. There are some areas that still need not only copper coat but also barrier coat. An example of that would be underneath the stands, and another example would be here underneath the keel, where all of Athena's 12 tons are currently being carried by these two keel supports. For me to be able to copper coat underneath them and also prime underneath them, I need to lift the boat and just shimmy them about yay much forward. Enter stage left, ye old-timey beefy car jack. What could possibly go wrong? If you're rooting to see me get squashed like a bug, I'm sorry, but you'll have to wait until the end of the video to see that. As of right now, the copper coat is still not fully cured, and I don't want to put all of Athena's weight on top of that not fully cured copper coat and wreck it. That would just mean more work. Copper coat can take up to 5 days to fully cure. Now come Sunday, it'll have had 8 days to cure, which should be plenty of time. And until then, well, I've got other stuff to keep me busy. Fun little side note, I wasn't actually planning on putting the stuff about raising the boat and moving the keel supports and also bracing the boat so that I can lower all of the 4 stands in a video, but I noticed all of the comments from you guys. So yeah, if there's something you want to see, be sure to leave a comment down below. Now let's head forward and see what I've got to keep myself entertained. In 3 or 4 weeks, Athena's going to get moved out of this shed, and before that happens, I desperately need to get the cabin tub finished so that I can put the port lights back in. The reason she's looking a little bit rough around the edges is because I rebuilt the entire deck last summer, and this is just a little bit of a residual joy from that experience. I'm almost done fairing the top of the cabin tub. There's just a little bit more sanding to do here. And then I need to fair and also sand the sides of the cabin tub. As you can see, I've got a little bit of a somewhat finished section over here. Truth be told, I am not looking forward to this job because I'm not an expert at fairing, and this is going to get painted with a high gloss paint. So any kind of low spots or pinholes are definitely going to show up. If it wasn't for the fact that I only have another 3 or 4 weeks left here in the shed, I might actually enjoy the learning experience, but yeah, I am pressed for time, so let's go ahead and get started. Like I said, I am no expert when it comes to fairing, but I do have at least somewhat of a plan for what to do with this. I'm sure some of you who are more familiar with fairing are going to let me know down in the comment section if I'm way off here. But my plan is to re-establish this curve up here. When I rebuilt the deck, I laid the glass from the top skin of the deck up the side of the cabin tub. That has left me with a little bit of a weird shape to this area up here. I've already filled in most of it with fairing compound, but that doesn't change the fact that this curve up here is kind of wonky and all over the place. I doubt it's going to show up on camera, but it is visible to the naked eye, and it's for sure going to show up once the cabin tub gets painted in super duper high gloss paint. Without a doubt, the most difficult thing about fairing the cabin tub is going to be this annoying edge up here, because it kind of curves in every possible direction. Now, I know I'm happy with the top of the cabin top, and I'm also happy with the forward part of the cabin top a bit further down, so this area down here. Let's just go ahead and throw a little bonus disclaimer in here. Like I said, I am not an expert at fairing, but I've been mulling this over a little bit, and quite frankly, I just haven't been able to come up with a better alternative. So the first thing I'm going to attempt to do is to get this bit up here perfect. By that, I mean I'm going to apply a bit of fairing compound to the top of the cabin top and also to the forward end of the cabin top. I'm going to let it extend down the forward end of the cabin top by about this much, not too much. Then when that is cured, hopefully that thin strip of fairing compound will be easier for me to shape into the shape I want. I guess by the end of this video we'll see if that is a horrible idea or not, but let's go ahead and get some more fairing compound mixed up. When I was fairing the hull, I was using TLG 625 from West Systems Pro Set series. And I really like that because it's super convenient to mix up, because you don't have to first mix up epoxy and then add the filler. But for the sides of the cabin top, I am going to switch back to regular old 407. There are a couple of reasons. For one, the sides of the cabin top are a much smaller area, so I don't have to mix up as much fairing compound. Also, the temperatures are starting to drop quite low, and I think we're sort of borderlining the recommended temperature for 625. And last, but certainly not least, I am out of 625. Yep, I think that is pretty much the consistency I want. To see if I can limit the amount of pinholes, I'm just gonna smush it around a little bit to get the air out of it and get everything mixed thoroughly. Rather than wasting the little bit of excess fairing compound I'd mixed up, I've gone ahead and taken care of some of the noticeable low spots. But let's fast forward until tomorrow and see what this looks like. And just like that, it is the next day. On a quick little side note, the cover coat feels rock solid and the surface seems very hard now. And that's awesome news, because that means for sure I'll be able to move the keel supports later this weekend. Up here on deck, the fairing compound I applied yesterday should now be ready for sanding. Yep, this feels perfect. On my way home yesterday, I ran into one of the old shipwrights here in Skive, and he suggested a way of fairing this annoying edge here. And in fact, if his method works, I could go ahead and use it for all the other edges here on the cabin top. This is what he suggested: to take a couple of stir sticks, drill a hole, bolt them together, apply fairing compound to the edge, and then drag this contraption along the edge. Like I mentioned yesterday, I am happy with the shape of the top of the cabin top, and I'm happy with the curve down here just above the openings for the port lights. And that's why I think this thing might work. The reason I say might is because I think these stir sticks are going to leave a very jagged edge in the fairing compound, but I'm going to give it a try this weekend and we'll see what happens. For now, I've got a lot of sanding to get to, so I better quit my yammering on and get to sanding. Good morning, guys. It is yet another couple of days later, also known as Saturday morning. Over the last few days, I've been over the sides of the cabin top another couple of times, fairing, sanding, and sanding. Yesterday, I used my big fairing tool to check the shape of the forward part of the cabin top. I held the tool up against the surface and looked for any gaps where light was visible. I found a few gaps that I marked with a pencil before applying more fairing compound. And this is where we're at now. She is far from done, but she is slowly getting closer. And the sides of the cabin top are also coming along nicely. Fun little side note here. Yesterday I switched sandpaper from this stuff to this stuff. and that made a huge difference. I think I've cut the time I spent sanding almost in half, and also I'm using way less paper with this stuff. This is recommended by the manufacturer of the sander that I'm using. The reason I didn't start out using this stuff was because the web shop where I purchased it accidentally sent me the wrong kind with these holes instead of the regular 14-hole kind. To be honest, I wasn't expecting much of a difference between the two, but oh boy was I wrong. And the good news is I've got almost 100 pieces of this one left, which is certainly going to be enough for the cabin tub. The only annoying thing is I really wish I would have figured this out when I was still sanding the hull. A few weeks back I removed the through holes from the cockpit drains here aboard Athena. This is one of the new super spiffy bronze ones. It goes without saying that I desperately need the cockpit drains to be functional again before I can move Athena out of the shed. If you recall, the holes for the through holes are a little bit on the large side. There's a little bit too much play in there. Now, one of the previous owners filled that gap between the through hole and the hull with Teflon tape. I think I can do better than that. Without a doubt, the most proper fix would be to grind the classic 1:12 bevel around these holes and lay up some new laminate. But that's difficult to do because of the location of this hole. See how close it is to this transition here to the bottom of the hull. Certainly not impossible to deal with, but time-consuming and annoying for sure. Add to that the fact that the holes are located somewhere around here, meaning if I was to bevel the outside, I'd be grinding part of the top sides away, which is going to be time-consuming to repair. There are a couple of positives to this situation. For one, the holes are located above the water, and also the holes are only slightly too large. Like any cooking show worth its salt, I've gone ahead and taken care of a little bit of prep work off camera and laid up a piece of laminate. This is around 4 millimeters thick, and it's going to serve as kind of a backing pad for the new through hulls. Ta-da! This should do a fine job as a backing pad. I've got a gap of about 1 millimeter all the way around the through hull. That's perfect. Rinse and repeat. Now I've got 2 of them, 1 for each of the 2 holes. I've gone ahead and prepped the surface of each of the 2 holes. With both hole drills, I can now go ahead and use the through holes to secure everything while the backing pads get adhered in place. This is a little bit of 105 thickened with 406, and for fillets or general bonding, 406 is the way to go. I've wetted out the surface with some unthickened 105, and now I'm just going to pipe on some of that 105 and 406. I just got to make sure that I don't get too much on here because I don't want it to end up in the threads of the through hull. Now I can go ahead and remove the little bit of protective masking tape I put on here. On goes the backing pad. And we can tighten everything down to make sure that everything is lined up correctly. I've left the little bit of thickened epoxy sitting in here. That way I can come back and check that cup every once in a while. Once the epoxy is tacky, then I can go ahead and remove the through holes before any thickened epoxy that's settled in the threads has a chance to fully cure. This is what those 2 new drains look like from the outside of the boat. Pretty dang spiffy. No doubt the astute amongst you will have noted that I now have a little bit of a void or a gap in between the single layer of glass I laid up before applying copper coat and the new backing pads. It looks a little something like this. Here we've got the hull. The thick line out here is that single layer of fiberglass. This is the through hull, and here we have that new backing plate or backing pad. And then here, in between the single layer of glass and the backing thingy, there is a small little void or gap. I'm not going to just leave those gaps sitting there. I'm going to deal with them later today with a little bit of thickened epoxy with some chopped up fiberglass mixed in it, and that's going to be perfectly fine. Now those two holes are located above the waterline, and that's why I feel comfortable doing that. And it's only a tiny little gap. It's not like the through holes are going to be pushed into the boat if that fails, although it's certainly not going to fail. But had those holes been located below the waterline, I would not feel comfortable doing that. I'm sure somebody is going to leave a comment down below saying, why did you go with bronze? Why not brass, stainless, or composite like this through hull from True Design? Going through the suitability of various metals as through hulls is a little much to just cram into this video. It would make an awesome video on its own, perhaps this winter when it's too cold for me to do anything else. But suffice it to say that bronze is a really good choice, and for certain things, it's maybe good not to use composite through hulls. I'm a big fan of composite through hulls and sea cargs. They are a lot more affordable than bronze ones, and they're not subject to galvanic corrosion. But there is one little drawback. If I jumped up and down on this without the load-bearing collar on here, there's a chance that this would snap in here close to the hull. The reason I say without the load-bearing collar on there is because I don't want a sea cog or valve on the drains for the cockpit. I just want a through hull with a hose spout fitting. And to the best of my knowledge, you can't get that in composite with a load-bearing collar. Here aboard Athena, the through hulls for the cockpit drain are located in the cockpit locker, and I'm going to be crawling in and out of here all the time. And by going with high-quality bronze through hulls, I'm able to just, jump up and down on those until the cows come home. They're not going to break. In areas that are more protected, where it's not likely that people are going to be jumping around or stuff is going to be crashing into the through hulls or sea cogs, I feel very comfortable going with the composite option. But in the cockpit locker, well, I figured I better err on the side of caution. While I'm waiting for the epoxy to cure enough that I can go ahead and remove the through hulls, I might as well go back to sanding. I am done sanding for today. Before I forget, let's just go ahead and check the state of the epoxy in my little cup in here. Yep, not fully cured yet, but certainly tacky enough that it'll hold everything in place. The threads are 100% epoxy free, so no cleanup needed. From down here, you can really see the size of that gap, but let's go ahead and get that filled. I've cleaned up around the outside and the inside of the holes, and once that epoxy is fully cured, I can go ahead and get my new through hulls installed. Good morning, guys. It is Sunday morning. Yesterday I tried using that contraption with the two stir sticks that the old shipwright recommended. In a few minutes, let's take a look at how that went. But first, let's see if we can lift the boat so I can move that keel support. This jack should be able to lift all 12 tons of Athena's weight. But of course, I don't need to lift all of that. I just need to lift one end at a time. I'm pretty sure this top piece of wood is epoxied to the keel, so I've cut another piece here. That way I can remove the bottom section of the keel support and get the full weight of the keel back on the keel support before working on removing this piece of wood. I've got the jack in underneath the keel, roughly positioned in the middle. I've got a piece of iron to spread out the load, and then a big block of wood to take up some of the space. Let's see how this goes. The weight is off both of the two aft stands, so we are lifting the boat, but I can't move the aft keel support yet, so we just have to lift it just a little bit more. As you can hopefully see, I am now well clear of the area I need to work on. Okay, just gonna lower this very slowly. I snugged up the stands as I was raising the boat to take up some of the play. And of course, now that I'm lowering the boat, I also have to lower these. Otherwise, they're gonna be taking the full weight of the boat, which is not great. Okay, there we go. Now we can lower the keel a little bit more. Okay, there we go. The full weight of the boat is back on the keel support. This is what the keel looks like before I fair it, lay up extra glass, barrier coat and cover coat. There's nothing like lifting your boat with a car jack to get the blood pumping in the morning. Now before we can head up and continue working on the deck, I just want to make sure that all the stands are okay. For instance, this one is too loose. And the forward ones are probably a little too tight. There we go. As I mentioned, I tried using the stir stick contraption yesterday on this edge here. And I think it's safe to say that it wasn't a complete failure and not a complete success. I don't know if it's going to show up on camera, but this is very rough. I mean, the shape is kind of there, but it's very rough. This is going to require me to go over it at least another couple of times, but yeah, I guess that's just fairing. Here on the sides of the cabin tub, I think I'm at the stage where I need to put away my power sander, get out the torture board and some guide code. By torture board, of course, I mean this manual sanding board from FlexiSander, and here we've got the guide code. Now, I'm sure once we get the guide code on here, I'm gonna see some low spots, but to the naked eye, this is starting to look pretty good. I'm not terribly concerned about the large flat surfaces. That's just a matter of plucking away, and then at some point they're gonna be good enough. The thing that has me puzzled right now is how do I do the corners? Both the outside corners and the inside corners like down here. I can't simply just use my router because I've got lots of different angles here. Like for instance over here, that's one angle. And then here we've got another angle. If you guys have any kind of suggestions as to how I get a nice uniform radius on these corners, I would love to hear it. Go ahead and leave a comment down below. And the same very much goes for this inside corner here where the cabin tub meets the deck. Any suggestions are welcome. I think we'll save the glorious manual sanding for next weekend's video, because how much sanding can I really put in a video without you guys running screaming for the hills? But there is one last little thing I want to get into this video. I don't know if this is going to be helpful to any of you guys out there, but it's something that I have sort of taken a while to realize myself, and that is when laying up glass, for instance here on the underside of the keel, it's a horrible idea to pre-wet the glass. You're much better off just laying it up dry. I've prepped the surface underneath here, and that means I've sanded it and I've removed any loose gel coat. I've also applied a little bit of epoxy thickened with 406 just to take up some of the unevenness in there. And I've cut a piece of glass that is a little bit oversized. I haven't used a template for this. I've just grabbed some rough measurements because if you cut a piece that's an exact match, you're never going to be able to line that up. But let's go ahead and get this in here. This is held in place perfectly fine by that little bit of 406. Now I can go ahead and get that wetted out before laying up another layer of fiberglass. Perhaps I should just mention that my primary reason for adding this fiberglass to the bottom of the keel is just to stabilize the surface. There was a bit of a loose gel coat in there and I think I got rid of all of it, but just to make sure. And the second layer is going to be the exact same process. And just like that, we've got 2 layers of glass and peel ply on here, easy peasy. I've used a bit of masking tape here just to help support the weight of the peel ply. And if we grab a quick peek here underneath the keel, you can see that looks absolutely perfect. And that is basically going to be it for this video. I'm going to spend the rest of the day doing some more glorious sanding and fairing. Don't forget, if you've got a suggestion as to how I can deal with those corners when fairing, I would love to hear it. Yeah, that is going to be it. As always, feel free to leave a comment down below, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like. See you!